So in continuation with this video, which you all might have seen about mythification of the history and historification of the myth, this is the second part of this video. In this part, we try to discuss about uh, how the myth are subtle codes and various things. The introductory part we have dealt here. In the final part of this video, we're talking about functionalism and four approaches, four toolbox there. But because we had some audio problems, so we're not able to complete this video in this recording. We're talking about this four parts of the thing. So in this second part of the video, we are going to discuss in detail about this four tools to read a myth or to do a mythical study of any literary text. Okay? So let us come to that. And okay, so so this is the part which we have dealt in part one of our discussion. Now we have to look at this four toolboxes, tools in a given box to study this. Let us take one by one. Okay. Uh, the theme of historification of myth and mythification of history. So, how can we approach this concern in the text? So, this tools which we are using here, how shall we approach this? What is myth? We can ask. How to study myth? Second question. And four tools to study myth. This approach can be applied for any sort of mythical study, or specifically the study of myth also, or wherever a writer, novelist, or a poet is trying to make use of myth as a tool for the narrative. There also it can be used. In our novel, that is Gun Island, Amitav Ghosh is making use of the myth, and then he is telling something that is historical and something that is quite contemporary also. So at three levels we see the thing. Yeah? He wants to tell something that is contemporary. Uh, he concocts one history, and then there is a myth in the background. So the myth in the background is about Chand Saudagar, Chand Sadgar or Chand Saudagar and Mansa Devi. The conflict between Mansa Devi and Chand Saudagar is a very well-known Bengali folklore, and he used that, which is known to everybody living around Sundarban. And then he incepted his historical story in this with the help of Bonduki Sadagar. So Bonduki Sadagar's story is a kind of a history which is creative history or which is created by Amitav Ghosh. And as if that history is being mythified in context of Mansa Devi and Chand Saudagar's myth also. But then that is not the end. He also gives a third journey of a similar kind. Now it is Dinanath's journey. So we come in contemporary events. And there are real life contemporary events happening in the novel, the way they are going on right now in and around us. Climate change is at the center of those things. Migration of the human people or human trafficking is the major issue today. And in that contemporary time, Dinanath's journey is located. So we have Chand Saudagar, we have Banduki Saudagar, and then we have Dinanath. Three layers in which he is dealing. One is myth, another is the history, which is created history, as if mythifying it, and the third one is the contemporary events, wherein the positions are created, wherein character Dinanath is undergoing the similar kind of journey. So that way we try to see this. When we will try to study this, we will use some of the ideas from Bronislaw Malinowski, Claude Lévi-Strauss, Sigmund Freud, Emil Durkheim, and Jan Harrison for this. Uh, Professor Peter Struck from Pennsylvania University has identified this all tools to study thing. So whatever things we are going to take are taken from Peter Struck's online class. He's from University of Pennsylvania, and from his online class on Greek mythology, these tools are taken from this. Then how does historification happen in literary text? How to demythify history? That is our second part of this answer. And here we will try to take ideas from Roland Barthes and Bertolt Brecht. Brecht or Brecht. German pronunciation is Brecht. In English, one can say Brecht also. So that we will see in the second part. So now let us see one by one these tools. First, myth and ritual. The four tools that we identified. From that, the first one, let us see myth and ritual. It is Emil Durkheim. It should be Emile in this. Just take the spelling. Emil Durkheim and James Harrison. They have given this, I think. So they both were anthropologists and they studied the role of myth and ritual in ancient societies. Durkheim's work, The Elementary Forms of Religious Life, argued that myths and ritual both serve as a purpose individual in society to come together and feel a sense of unity and social cohesion. So, what role does this play, or how they emerge? How myth and ritual emerge, or ritual and myth? What is the connection that becomes significant? Jane Harrison, in this work, talked about understand the function of rituals in ancient Greek society and the beliefs and practices that underlie them. So, what are the beliefs and practices which might be underlying there? What is the function? So, from there we will move to the second part, that is functionalism. Bronislaw's way of looking at functionalism also. But what we see here, what they do, for example, the new word is coined by Durkheim, and Durkheim says that this term is collective effervescence. Collective effervescence. Uh, it means to say that when human beings are collectively doing something, there is a different kind of euphoria of doing that. And sometimes it is something that is done that is completely brainless or something meaningless, but they keep on doing because large number of people are doing, and that is what explains rituals. So there is a form of a collective effervescence which controls the ritualistic behavior of people while people do all those kinds of things. The example which can be given is about a kind of cricket match in a stadium. uh, the way everybody is enjoying the cricket match, and there is a different kind of an euphoria, that as if that cricket match is the only thing very important for the world. There is nothing else so important as the match of cricket. That kind of an involvement people might have in within that stadium. The world is a larger stadium, and within that we have our own rituals and practices which people keep on repeatedly doing it. And sometimes this behavior is collective effervescence, that they keep on doing the things. But sometimes it happens that some people will come in that process and they will ask, why are we doing this? Durkheim explains that process, that from ritual, how we get to myth. So when somebody is asking a question that why are we doing this, myth rushes in. There is the time for a myth to come. And there is the time that somebody will now tell a story, that why should we do this. So then comes the story. First there is the ritual, and then when somebody is asking a question, that why should we do this, then a story is required, a myth, and then the myth comes there. What's really motivating and driving this part of the story is an attempt by human beings to come up with an explanation for some strange ritual or ritualistic behavior that they otherwise could not figure out, or they cannot explain in any different way. So that story helps to explain that why we do such a kind of a thing there. So this is the basic premise. With myth and ritual tries to look at it, that this is myth and the ritual. They have this connection. People do something collectively, they do, so they do not find a problem in doing that. But someday somebody might have a question, so you require to tell a story to that person, and then the myth comes. That is the connection there. That story re-establishes the very idea of doing that. But as we know that with the change of time, story has to change. So we need to have new interpretations, we need to apply new hermeneutics, and we have to tell a story which is convenient to the contemporary people. So that ritual continues, but with the change of the time, with the change of the thing, it continues in its own way. So keeping this in mind, how we try to read this novel, or how we try to get illustrations from this novel for ritual and for the myth. So our first question is that ritual is provocative. There is a collective effervescence in this. So what sort of ritual is coming in this novel? What can you identify as a ritual in this novel? Yes, anybody would like to? Yes, yes.
I'm not confirm about this answer, but we can say that everyone used to go to shrine and worship the shrine, and as the novel describes that it was worshipped by two religions, like for by Hindu there's Mansa Devi, and by Muslims as being as considering the shrine of Nakhuda Ilyas. And as a ritual, everyone was going to shrine and worshipping them. But then Dinanath Datta, our protagonist, came and questioned about this shrine. And then slowly the story started coming out that how and what happened to Bondu Kadagar, and then the story moves forward.
Okay, fine. Good example. Anybody else would like to add to this? Okay. Okay. Is it proper? Down. Okay, so what we get here is this. The ritual is pilgrimage. Yeah? Visit to a shrine, or what we call it as dham, as even the word dham is used by Amitav Ghosh here. Okay? So that is the ritual, and we find that like throughout the cultures, there are such holy places. There are such holy places which are visited by people. So that is a common ritual found worldwide. This. So that is what people keep on doing. Now here Dinanath is not willingly doing that, but accidentally he comes into a situation where he becomes a part of this process of going on a ritual or going on a pilgrimage. We know that traditionally going on a pilgrimage was always considered a difficult task. Like in India also we used to have rituals, rituals connected with rituals. That if somebody returns back after Char Dham Yatra, then the entire village will go to greet them. It was as if so difficult that rarely people were expected to come back. They're not expected that these people will come. There is lots of hardship in going through those things in the mountain terrain or oceans or other things. So when they return back, it is a happy event for everybody, and they all greet them with a huge surprise and other things there. So that is how it is. So here also, when Dinanath is going, he has to face lots of hardships. There is a dirt of Sundarban. There is a mud which is calling him back. He falls in the mud. The clothes needs to be changed again and again. He has to put his wallet, his mobile phone, everything away from him. So it is more like the traditional thing that where all these leather things or mobile devices are not allowed when you are visiting the shrine or the holy place. You might have seen even today when you visit that people don't allow you to carry leather belts, leather wallet, shoes, or mobile phone. You have to drop everything outside, and then only you have to go. Like traditionally, people were having the very idea of minimalistic when you are on the journey of spirituality. That is the spiritual journey, and so you should possess as less as possible. If lots of possessions you carry and then you go on a spiritual journey, then that is moh maya. That moh maya will not allow you to liberate yourself from the real world on the path of spirituality. So that is symbolically coming here in the journey of Dinanath. Also, that how he has to disown his wallet, his mobile phone, and he also has to wear a lungi, that is traditional dress, and then he moves on to the visit of Mansa Devi's shrine there. But this, there is a curious thing that this is worshipped. This shrine uh, is worshipped by both Hindu as well as Muslims. So this pilgrimage place or this shrine is worshipped by both. So there is some kind of complexity that we find here. Normally, we don't have such complexities in other religious places and other things. Maybe because of this, what story, what mythical story Amitav Ghosh wants to reconstruct here is that there is this human and on the other side nature. So this religious practice is not for a specific deity called Mansa Devi as such, who is the goddess of Hindus, or Ilyas, Pir Ilyas, who is somebody worshipped by Muslims. So not limiting to either Pir Ilyas or Mansa Devi, but converting those symbols into nature itself. And all the humans are affected by this idea of nature. So whatever is told in the story, he is retelling in this time with the help, with the context of climate change. So if there is a past story of visiting Mansa Devi, and if you don't visit, then Mansa Devi becomes angry, and she allows all those poisonous creatures to haunt you, to hunt you. And there was Chand Sodagar who denied to bow down to Mansa Devi, and so all those, the anger of Mansa Devi haunted Chand Sodagar, and he kept on running away from one place to another place from the wrath of Mansa Devi. That wrath is of nature. There might be calamities going on, not really somebody who is Devi or Dev who is haunting or hunting, but there will be lots of problems of ajivika, roji roti, and so he might be running for a better livelihood from one place to another place until he finds some good source of income, some wealth, and then he comes back, and then he creates a shrine in the name of nature, that we should not be suffered by the calamities, so we can stay here happily and don't have to run out or don't have to rush out. So that is how we reinterpret or reread Mansa Devi's myth, what perhaps Amitav Ghosh also wants us to do that here. And in between, he created one another story of 17th century. In between, he created another, the same way, the same ritual, somebody going out under the wrath of the anger of some Devi or Dev, and he is running away from that, and then but is hunted down at all the places. And that is Banduki Sodagar, and that is 17th century. And then he rationalizes when he tells the story myth. He gives the logic that 17th century also was the century where there was lots of natural calamities. Uh, Unbelievable events were happening, and that's why there is a seminar in Los Angeles where there is one young fellow reading a paper on 17th century calamities. And so he gives a record of so many such unnatural, uncanny events were happening in one century during that time. And then he connects that exactly it is the same time that coal was also identified as a source of energy during that time, and that was the real beast who we brought out, and then that beast is now playing havoc with us. So we brought a beast from the hell outside this, and that beast now is responsible for our climate change and all those things also. So that is why that 17th century story, that seminar, the paper in seminar which is read, and all the incidents are given about that. So, three layers of story. What is the ritual and how the ritual is explained through myth in a different way. So, if you go back to Nilima Bose's story, then it will tell that Mansa Devi angry on somebody because he's not worshipping, and so he person is running. Uh, Rafi's story will say there was a peer who helped this Chand Sodagar, and so in the memory of that, he will tell it is Banduki Sodagar, and in the memory of that, there is this peer whose reminiscence or memory is stored in this shrine. That is the story he will tell. Amitav Ghosh will tell us new interpretation. This running away from the anger of somebody is nothing but running away from the anger of nature, from running away, trying to run away from the calamities of nature. And you want just to see that nature is happy on us so we can keep on living happily wherever we are. So that way we try to apply this reading of myth and ritual in this novel. Now coming to functionalism, from functionalist approach, and we find that Bronislaw Kasper Malinowski gave this idea. He studied cultures, noticed that they told stories to people. Stories are repeated over and over. Now we know stories are repeated here also over and over. Mythic stories were turned to in the society, and they had a certain central role in the building of a culture also. So this all stories, they slowly and steadily help in building community or culture. In the past it was culture. Today we will replace this word culture with community also, because we want to talk about climate change idea. There was a specific way that these stories were used by the cultures. Specifically, Malinowski said when cultures tell myths, what they are doing is legitimizing. This is an important word. They legitimize certain kinds of underlying social and cultural norms here. Okay. So, one was building culture, or we can call it community. Then underlying social and cultural norms that they hold dear or they like those things. They serve a purpose. They are not just there to delight and entertain us or to give us the versions or to teach us about the sort of universal structure of the cosmos. Okay? So they are there to perhaps explain some sort of universal structure of cosmos. That is why the myths are there. There are those functional things about this. Okay? So, what function does the myth of Mansa Devi and Chansudaga serve in the novel, and what is the purpose of retelling it in our time? That question we can straight away ask when we want to do functionalist reading of this novel. Function and purpose. What function does the myth of Mansa Devi and Chansudaga serve, and what is the purpose in our time, our contemporary time? Okay, so very quickly in this line, I want some quick response from you in this three, 4 points which are given here. Who would like to add something to this? For example, critical time, yes, yeah.
As the function of meat of Mansadevi and Chan Sodagar is serving as when we are promising or asking something to be for ourselves, and then whatever we have promised back to them, if we are not doing that, then in the critical, the time it comes that they will haunt us in some way or other. So whatever we have promised to the nature or society as our role, we need to complete it on time.
Okay, for example, first thing that we see, anybody else would like to add anything here? Then, yes, okay. Mm. Okay, anybody else? Okay. Okay, so critical time. You can. We also are just still in pandemic time. Corona pandemic we are going, and like China is still facing lots of cases nowadays, and maybe the world may see the wrath in the coming months also. So we are still in this time, and it is this time where we talk a lot about or care for nature, and we try to see that how the human nature relations are to be revisited or rethought in this. That is one. Another point is climate change. So almost every day nowadays, we see that there is some kind of a curious behavior of nature. We have seen earlier that a few days back in Saudi Arabia, in the desert of Saudi Arabia, there was flood. There are floods. Yeah. So very surprising to see that the desert is flooded. Or last January, we had snowfall in Sahara Desert. So camels under the snow is like we can't even imagine in surrealistic manner also. Even in any of the surrealism, we never imagine camels under the desert, under the snowfall. They're always in the desert, hot, humid region, but in the desert, that is also happening there. We have seen the news about what is happening in Trivandrum and how the ocean is claiming the land, or here near Bhavnagar, Goga, and ISRO has just given the warning that the natural wall is broken and Goga is under the threat of ocean water, which we have seen few days back in our local newspaper also. So this is a very curious behavior of climate change, and the novel also deals with the idea about what happens to Sundarban, how it is sinking, what happens to not only the humans but even to dolphins, spiders, snakes, the animal world, the birds, they all are also having a curious kind of migration pattern because of some kind of change that is happening in the world there. So that is the concern. So he says it is not only third world country or poor people who are suffering. It is country like Italy also. The Venice historical, cultural, religious center of Italy is also under threat. So that sinking of Venice also is going on. Recently only we have seen the floods again, which are entering the church and all those places of Venice also. So that also is sinking. And then he also speaks about America, wildfires in America. And what was imagined in the novel became reality next year. It was imagined here, but then it became a reality. It was very near to the locality of the people. So in the novel, we had a scene where the seminar was suddenly changed. There was an announcement while the seminar is going on that now the wildfire is catching, so we'll have to quickly change the place. So that way, he has brought the idea of climate change in the novel. That how people are gathered to talk about the things, and at a time when one person has made an argument that 17th century was about calamities and we are on the verge of seeing those little ice ages. Before the larger ice age, there are signs from the nature, and there are little ice ages for a year or so, and then for 100 years nothing happens, and then something happens. So by the 100 years time, humans are in amnesia. They have forgotten what happened 100 years back, but slowly and steadily we keep on moving. We rarely document natural calamities, so the posterity is not aware about it. That this sign is the sign of ice age. So little ice ages we are moving on, and there were many people who doubted the speaker. There were many people in the group who doubted. They laughed, they made fun that those things might not happen. This is just nature. Nature behaves in that way. No need to worry, kind of a thing. And the announcement happens that the wildfires are very near. We have to vacate this place. You have to move at the another place. So quite dramatically, Amitav Ghosh is making use of wildfires in America into the novel also. So when we are in a critical time like this of pandemic or climate change, we need to build a community which cares for climate change or tries to understand the relation between nature and human. Yes, nature and human relations, how we need to understand that in a newer way. So now perhaps it is not necessary that we call this is Devi or Dev or Peer and that is angry on that. That story may not be convincing to many people. We straight away will have to tell them that well, what was happening in past was also not any god or goddesses but nature. It is happening again. Uh, shall we tell the same story again or shall we understand in a more secular term about how nature behaves? Why should we require the same story again and again? Let us try to understand the behavior of a nature in a way which is already told to us by various myths also. So let us reread the myth of the past with this new interpretation. So we apply new hermeneutics in the reading of the past myth also and say that that myth also was for nature. For a while, let us say it was not nature, it was real Mansa Devi. But let it be Mansa Devi for them. For us now, let Mansa Devi turn into nature. And let us read that in the new context or reinterpret it in a different way. So, what kind of cultural norms this tries to legitimize? So, it tries to say that one's behavior with nature needs to be seriously reconsidered. That is what is required to be legitimized here. And it should become a cultural norm there. So, in past, when the communities were living in the forest, we call it sacred groves. Sacred grooves. Yes, sacred grooves we used to have. We have one photograph out here also, the staircase about sacred groove, where there might be a small place of worship, but that small place of worshipping was not allowing anybody to disturb the forest. It was protecting forest. It was protecting the wildlife of the forest also. So if anybody would come and damage forest or wildlife, then the people who are religiously connected with that place, they will be ready to die or to kill somebody who is damaging forest and wildlife. That was the purpose. So that small shrine was not occupying such a large space that shrine itself is damaging the nature. It was not so. It was a very small, tiny place in that. Uh, Today, with sacred groves, what we do is Sanskritization. Sanskritization. Yeah? So, as a part of Sanskritization, what we do, we make the small shrine into a huge temple. And so we cut down large amount of forest, the land and other things. Also, we have seen the video of Palitana also, where how on a tiny mountain cliff, lots of construction is already being done in many places. That keeps on happening there. So that is Sanskritization. So in the name of religion, also in the name of God and goddesses, we now like we get a license to destroy nature. So we need to build a community or we need to legitimize our cultural norms in such a way where we invoke past history or we invoke the community life which was lived by the people in sync with the nature. That becomes very important here. So they are not just entertaining story, but give us the version or teach us about the sort of universal structure of cosmos also. So today, if we think that climate change can affect so many species and lives in a different way, then we need to say that these stories or the stories that we tell today, which are the myth for tomorrow. Today's stories are the myth for tomorrow. This where yesteryear's stories are today's myth. So when we turn them into that, we perhaps leave a message for posterity that this our story was talking about our time, and like we perhaps will be successfully able to save the world because of these stories. And we tell the people that whenever you see such signs and other thing, you will have to understand the cosmic behavior in a different way. You have to tell again new stories to your people. You can tell the same story also, but you need to reinterpret with the contemporary time also. That is the functional way of reading the myth, or how, or what is the purpose of myth also in this context here. So that is function and purpose of retelling the stories in our time. This point, retelling is very important. It doesn't tell the story as it is. It is not always. Retelling doesn't mean you tell again the way it is. You surely have to connect it with today's events also. So when Amish Tripathi is retelling Ramayana, he will put in his book on Sita that Sita is doing conversation with Bharat about feminism, which is so modern that amount of feminist thinking was not perhaps available 100 years back also, not even in European societies also during that time. That kind of language discourse he is giving to Sita. He makes Sita a warrior rather than a docile Sita, which the television serial Ramanand Sagar has presented to us. So when you retell, you have to do this. You have to build a new culture community. You have to legitimize new forms of cultural norms, and you tell about the cosmic world order or social world order to the new people by using the old story. Okay, so then coming to the third point, the third tool to read this, that is structuralism. Claude Lévi-Strauss is used here. So structuralists see myth as a particularly dense cultural production, which in their way must have resulted from some binary pair of oppositions that have come under the threat in the culture that produced it. So whether this idea about something coming under threat in that, but apart from that, this is a very interesting tool: binary oppositions. That how we put the things together as a tool to read. That they try to read myth, and first of all to get rid of the narrative arc. So for them, as for the myth and ritual and functionalism, the narrative arc was important. So what happens to Chand Saudagar also happens to Banduki, also happens to Dinanath. And then their journey is initiated. They have the same experience in the journey. That is the narrative arc of the three stories that are there. Here, that arc is not important. They get rid of the narrative arc, but they try to find the points, pair of binary oppositions. Then they look at the features that are in the story and the elements that make the story. The best structuralist reading is the one that provides two opposite categories into which the largest number of features in the myth can fit. So for a structuralist, this is a challenge, that how would he bring this two categories in such a way. There are chances of multiple categories in a novel. You can find immense categories. Now here, if you can bring in such a categories where most of the other points can fit in well, then that is one of the good readings of a myth or a narrative through structuralist approach here. They find places for all the features of the story. These are anchored uh, in opposite pieces of what it is to be human also. So opposite pieces, this human element becomes important because myths are story about divine intervention also. And when we study the myth and the stories of gods and goddesses, we also actually what we study is what is it to be human. That is always the quest there also. When we try to read, or many times we have done this, that when we try to apply digital humanities or try to see the digital tools in literature classroom, we are always questioning that the way this machine is thinking is very near to the way human mind thinks. So when we study how the machine thinks, actually we are trying to reinvent human being. Our quest is to see what is it to be human when we see how the machines think in different ways. So our quest is that. When we do this, what we are actually doing is we are applying structuralist approach in that process. So that conclusion we are getting. So here you don't read machine generated text or language, but you read the language which is generated through myth generated language, myth generated stories we study, and then we try to see that what is it to be human also. But for us, binary is very important. For structuralist, binary oppositions are very important. So let us see what way we can categorize the things here. So how can we do structuralist reading of Gun Island, and what are those larger categories which we can put as binary opposition in this context, which can help us to fit in major events and incidents of the novel, and we make a structure of reading that. So let us see in context of West and East, or Orient and Occident. As we know, Amitav Ghosh is very much conscious about post-coloniality. He is writing in a post-colonial time and is very much conscious about this. So that point we have made again and again. So let us pick up that binary of post-colonialism of East and West and try to see what is the difference and how all the elements of this story or the myth fit into these categories here. So how we put West is rational, then here it is intuitional. If it is logical, then here it is magical. Analytical, then other you call it now getting. Many times it happens because of this OBS. This analytical, we may call it in opposite illogical, or rather more comprehensive also. Superior to inferior, scientific to superstitious, Eurocentric to holistic, monotheist to polytheist, anthropocentrism to ecocentrism. So in these points, if we try to locate our story, then how or what are the points that we can find here that we need to see here. I hope these binaries are very clear, first of all. Yes, the binaries, any question in the binaries that you see here? Do you find any of the binaries which you cannot understand? Or briefly you can connect with the narrative also. Briefly you can see, but still you can ask when we see the next slide about how we can read this together in that context also. Go through the binaries and see whether most of these binaries are clear in a larger category of East and West. Going on?